saw a new chapter that would forever change the DNA of our shared history. On the banks of the Lisbon River, where we will walk to today, in 1657, was when the very first title deeds were granted by the Dutch East India Company to the Freeburger farmers. These 9 farms demonstrated and earmarked the beginning of a colonial conquest whose trauma and whose journey we commemorate today. Yet it is not only about the intergenerational trauma of the Khoi and San, of the genocide, the ethnocide, the epistemological violence of our history has been rewritten, outwritten, co-written, designed in a way that we still feel befuddled in terms of who we are as South Africans. So we start this journey today at Oudtshoorn. Oudtshoorn is a place of resistance, and Iziko will announce also its intention of building in support with the Oudtshoorn community an interpretation of a center to my right. This building here is where Kampande Tsetswayo, the king of the Zulu nation, after the Battle of Isandwana, having secured the greatest victory, was captured and kept under house arrest. And this begins to tell us a story of an immense kind of diversity that all South Africans need to know and that we need to share. At Oudtshoorn, this is a precinct where, on the 1st of March 1510, Francisco de Almeida, the Viceroy, the Admiral of the Portuguese colonial fleet, moved up these embankments and raided this kraal, captured a few children, took a few women. And after the raid, they went back down the embankments and were met by a standing army of Khoi. A Khoi that had a symbiotic relationship with their cattle, a deep, soulful relationship with their cattle, that formed a phalanx and defeated Almeida and his men, which included 13 captains of that fleet and 87 men on that day, including the Almeida himself. We will talk more about that as we move along this journey. And we will recognize one essential thing, that on that day was a victory for the Khoi and San. But more so than that, we escaped a destiny of being a Portuguese slave colony. And while the rest of East and West Africa was under dominance of the Portuguese for the next 100 years, when the soldiers reported this incident to the king himself, the king issued an edict and said, for the next 100 years, you will stay off the Cape of Good Hope. And for those 100 years, until the lie of 1652, the indigene and the Khoi greeted seafarers, greeted people of many nationalities, of many diversities. And so it is the shared narrative that we will be talking about today. On the banks of the Lisbon River, when those farms were established, the Khoi did not surrender. And because the Dutch East India Company, which was the first company that had a large standing army and was a capricious master, had very high demands from their freeburgers. And in the absence of free, cheap labor, because they were battling with the resisting Khoi. And just to mention the peninsular groups that are of akin here, would include groups like the Khorokhokhwa, the Gorenaikwa, the Gorenaikona, the Kaikorana. Greetings to Kubaha Aransa, who has just arrived. And it is here during these battles, in the absence of that labor, that the Dutch East India Company deployed their slaves. Slaves came from around the world, from India to Goa, Java, Madagascar. and they tilled the topsoil of Malta Park by Hartleyville, the River Club. And they intermingled with the Freeburger farmers. And those who wanted to escape their servitude and slavery found sanctuary amongst the Khoi groups because they found solidarity against a common enemy. And through this emerged a diversity, the paradox of the Kuna people today, the beauty of that diversity, which includes every footprint of the globe, but is deeply founded and nourished on the earth of this terrain. And that is what we will commemorate today. It is a time where, as communities, we will determine for ourselves what we are going to preserve, what we are going to nourish, and what we are going to protect. We will move from this place and go down to the embankments of the Black River. There we will acknowledge the water. And then we will snake around, go over the Oudemolin Bridge that moves into Valkenburg, and around the perimeter wire, through the conservation area, through another bridge, in between the South African Observatory itself, and acknowledge the term Amirode Kais, which means the place where the stars gather, and say that this is the name of our place where the stars gather, and that as people, as residents, as those who are connected to this place, we have the ultimate inheritance of the stars and the ultimate inheritance of being the custodians of a ground zero precinct, a place of reckoning, and ultimately a place of our healing. And there we will unveil a plaque that was vandalized 8 months ago through a heritage crime and reported to the city of Cape Town. But to this day, nothing has been done about it. So the communities have said and have taken the responsibility and the opportunity today to replace that plaque ourselves, and also to ensure that there's a very strong sense of our place. There is another threat, another Dutch East India Company that beckons like a Trojan horse on the banks of the Liesek River, that yields the same power, the same influence that we've known before. And we will speak about that too. And so, welcome everybody. This is what we'll do today. And as we move along, just to say that we have a draft manifesto that has been written by some of the organizations and traditional groups, which will become a living document of this day. As you move around, we'll have people asking you for comments on how you feel, what the experience is. And we'll try and put that together so that becomes a living document, a manifesto that is dedicated to this moment, that every year for the next years, we will do our walk of resistance. And today it is a walk towards freedom still. Aisekure, Kakingat.
Like says, good morning, Goeiemorgen, Moweni. It is a beautiful day today indeed. It's a typical day on the banks of the Liesbeek during autumn. And every time I stand here, it's a privilege to understand the amount of energy that was released here over the centuries, and the footprints that lie on the banks of these rivers. And today we are segregated by so many things. We are segregated by material conditioning, by our political views, by even religion, even culture. But strangely, it's always circumstance and adversity that brings us together. That's the sum of our humanity, isn't it? And today when we look at this, we ask ourselves, what would Cape Town look like if every blade of grass is removed from us? If these rivers become pylons of the piece of weed in every tree we see here are no longer here, if the animals, especially the unseen ones, have no habitation here anymore, can you imagine having a job, living in a place that resembles a desert? It's deprived of every blessing and every prayer of all the centuries before us that prays for this to be protected and to flourish. We cannot flourish at the expense of what we stand on. We cannot flourish on the basis or in the name of economic development, because to give your child a job, you don't have to sell your child, do you? Where do we have a manifestation of slavery in a free society? I assume it's free because people like my family gave their lives for us to be free. In 1912, in a small little clip church, rock church in Heidedal, my family stood there at the birth of the ANC, knowing and understanding it's going to change our way forward. And before that, we had to fight 9 frontier wars. It wasn't against the Dutch. It wasn't against the British either. It was against men who came here with a mandate that wasn't conducive to our way of life. That war was never against white people. It became a black and white war during apartheid. Because in our collective memory of Kuna, there were no such things such as black and white. It was just men with different motives. It was just men with different motives. So I say to you today, as the last born of the dynasty that was born from the Kham people, as our ancestor, this was his kraal, Gogosoa, from which they were born as well, Gorinai Kona. And in all those years of struggle, we tangled with the mandates of men that wants to consume things that does not belong to them. And this place that we're standing on does not belong to the Korana or the Gorinai Kona. All my Nama and Kokukwa brothers I see here. It belongs to the descendants of us that must still be born. They must still be born. And they will be Islamic. They will be Jews. They will be Christians. And some of them even unbelievers. But it belongs to them. It fundamentally belongs to them as the future managers of our heritage estate. We cannot extend poverty from one generation to the next. We cannot extend calamity from one generation to the next. So I'm asking all of you here today, all of you to raise your hand if you fully understand and agree that we cannot allow segregation and any form of greed at the expense of another, any kind of racism that diminishes one on behalf of the other, any kind of segregation that diminishes a woman as less than a man. These are abominations before our God and Creator. So I want you to commit yourself today that it's not a fight, it's a way of life, that we will not surrender the Lisbeth River to the likes of Amazon. We will not surrender to the likes of SKA. In the rural areas of the Western Cape, you have the most amazing landscaping, where massive investment is required. Why do we want to turn Cape Town into a dormitory for the ideal market space for Amazon? They can create a digital platform in their imaginations to have their headquarters, not on our land. I want to go back to the beginning of this. Goodness. I want to commend 2 people today. One of them is no longer here. Advocate Hissam Muhammad, former Western Cape Provincial Director of the Department of Justice, who started this process with us, with Ibrahim Rasool, former ambassador and former premier, who said 2 specific things. The only thing that can unite our children is something older than us all. Something that comes from a world far older than this one. And that is our collective heritage estate. The peculiar thing today is, if it's not our hair or our color or a social standing that is supposed to define who we are. But it's not, it's our legacy. And if we keep ourselves segregated in what is our fight for survival, if we are segregated in that, we will hand over a fragmented estate which our children and grandchildren will not be able to figure out. So I'm asking all of you today, those who started the fight, let us remember them. Advocate Hissam Muhammad, no longer here, but his spear came to this ground. His hopes and dreams came to this ground. So we will remember him and say, Tau Matum, Hissam Muhammad. Go well to all the happy hunting grounds of your ancestors. I want to say lastly, and most importantly, thank you to Paramount Run for standing in unity. I see the Nama leaders are here. Chief Fredericks, can you just raise your hand? Chief Fredericks, can you come forward, please? The official of the Gorinai Kona, Kokokwa, can you come forward, please? Today, as a saying in Qur'an, titles don't honor men. It is men who honor titles. And we Qur'ana for generations had to surrender our titles and our lives for the sake of our people. And I will do so again. And I ask all of us, let us stand together. Let us go home. Make it a part of our way of life to fight for this piece of land. To fight for the precinct. To fight for Oudtshoorn. Because it belongs to us. Look in your family bloodline. Here stands the king of the Transfrontier, who has a Scottish woman as a grandmother, a great-grandmother. So we are so interweaved. We have no place or no right to segregate ourselves when history calls upon us to defend what belongs to all of us. Raise up your hand and say, this is our soil. It is our inheritance. Jew, Muslim, Christian, whatever, black, white, it is our inheritance. My boy!
Come on, people, we can all make a noise. All right, thank you. Past the observatory on our left, and that is a National Heritage Site, and it's also a place where there was slavery. There are many things in observatory which are important for us to acknowledge, that sites of resistance, but there are also things we're not so proud of. Observatory was, we discovered, the site of the first Immorality Act prosecution. The dreaded Pass Office had an administrative office over there. So we are very committed to recognizing our history and making sure that everything in our history is opened up and is part of a collective memory. We can't forget what happened during apartheid. And I want to also point out that when the River Club development started, the Observatory Civic Association first in 2016 asked, well, where's the Khoi heritage in this proposal? And then when the heritage impact assessment was presented to us up the hill at the Observatory Community Centre, we asked the developers, who have you consulted with? And they couldn't tell us one single name. And then 2 years later, in 2018, at the Heritage Western Cape Appeal Tribunal, the room was full of First Nation leaders saying this is unacceptable, this is not going to go forward. And yet now we have seen the city and the province put this through. But we know that script was written a long time ago. It was written in a way that made sure that the development was allowed to proceed. If the city was serious about preserving and honouring Khoi history, It should have helped Heritage Western Cape grade the area instead of joining the developers in appealing their provisional protection order in 2018. And the same for Department of Environmental Affairs. They overrode the Heritage Western Cape reasoning that the heritage impact assessment was inadequate because it failed to give proper recognition of Khoi history. But DEDP went ahead and approved that. So I just want to welcome you all and read a comment by an Aboriginal scholar who talks about the land. And she says, first people have a relationship with country that is loving, reciprocal and engaged. This is Zina Kumston, a Barkanji Aboriginal scholar. This kin-centric relationship includes custodianship obligations, often lacking in non-indigenous views of country. Instead of being seen as kin, something to be cared for, listened to, deeply respected and nurtured, country is seen by many non-indigenous people as a resource to be exploited and controlled. And we are on the side of the Khoi nations who are standing up to say it's enough, that this is not acceptable to take this land, subjugate it, control it, turn it into an economic benefit without recognition of the real value of the land for our identity. Thank you very much.
Welcome now, Tariq Jenkins. He's spoken to us before, he's led the tour so far. He'll give you a background.
Welcome to the banks of the Lisbech River. Here lies the root of the ancestors of mankind itself. And it was here in 1659 because of the very first theft of land which we are actually now standing on, when the title deeds were gifted by the Dutch East India Company to the Freeburger farmers, that the original sin occurred. And so this is a ground zero precinct, a site which we hold very dearly as all South Africans, in that it presents an opportunity to heal and to reconcile deep traumas that re-enter into our psyche generation after generation since that moment. In 1659, this particular terrain was the first frontier. The wars that resulted from this particular precinct had a domino effect and fanned out 16 Khoi wars as a result. The Khoi Mfetane started here. And during this 186-year period of liberation and resistance struggle, we saw the exile of a number of Khoi groups, of San, but most importantly and unfortunately, the eternal loss and the genocide of the Cape San. Together with the stories of massacre, the stories of exile and removal and genocide, which still are not acknowledged formally in our country, this is a place where we want that acknowledgement to occur, because this is that place. But not only are we talking about how the colonial bomb decimated a sense of connection to the river for people, it also resulted in the extirpation of very sacred animals such as the quagga, the blue buck and the Cape lion. These animals were also part and are part of a symbiotic relationship in terms of how we define the universe in dreams. And the exorcising and erasing the sound of the quagga, which is onomatopoeic for the animal quagga, from the Lisbech Valley, would also hold a deep hole within a deeper spiritual connectivity to place. So once the Freeburger farms were established and Jan van Riebeck put up his fence, which initially was a palisaded fence, we call it the iron fence. It started just on that side of the river and stretched all the way across, and later on became an almond fence which stretched all the way up to Kirstenbosch. That fence was the demarcation of where agricultural land was also part of the removal, the forced removal of indigenous people from the river, as well as animals from accessing the river. And so the confluence of the Lisbek River and the Black River is a sacred place. It's a place where important ritual have occurred there for a millennia. It is also a very sensitive floodplain. And these are the kinds of qualities that are under threat at the moment, which we'll talk about a bit later. But ultimately, when we talk about this particular terrain, we talk about a terrain of a particular kind of birthright. A birthright that has been lost and denied, and that descendants of the Khoi and San and all South Africans have a conjoined, entangled memory of resistance and identity. Afrikaans as a language emerged from this precinct when the slaves were brought down and intermingled with the Freeburger farmers and the Khoi. And so too do we see how we must return. And the closer we are to ourselves, in many ways relate to our physical distance to the Lisbek River itself. And in that sense, we're here to commemorate these battles, these wars that were fought. I will give a small snippet in terms of the relevance of the 1st of March 1510. Francisco de Almeida, who was the strongest and most feared admiral at the time, he had completely ransacked and sacked Calcutta. In the Goa in 1509, he had, through sheer steel and determination, colonized India, East Africa and the West. He had set up the forts in Goa, and on one particular fatal afternoon, because he was avenging his son Lorenzo, who had perished in a fight with the Calcutta, he sent out messages to the local kings and sultans saying that the Dalmeida is here, and he's here with the full might of his king and God. And when he issued the orders of his soldiers, he said, let the people of Calcutta remember Dalmeida, let their grandchildren remember Dalmeida. And what had happened was that it was a massacre. Limbs were strewn and scattered and also painted on the walls of that place. And so another kind of trauma had emanated in that part of the world. Soon he was called back to Portugal. He came round the Cape of Good Hope, and on the way a soothsayer told him that this would be his final journey. And when he arrived here, as was explained earlier, by the embankments, the shoreline of the Salt River, sea, the beach, walked up to Oudtshoorn, raided the kraal, came back down, and was met by a standing army of Khoi who had a symbiotic relationship with their cattle that formed a phalanx and pushed him, Dalmeida, and his men to the sea, armed with whistles, with bows, and with stones. Something else came of that day. A day that should have belonged to a slave master, backed by an extraordinary empire of immense strength and sophistication. But the Khoi severed, because by that time ships were coming past the Cape, and the news of what Dalmeida was doing in India was also settling over here. And so in some way they were very aware that this was a precinct that had to be defended. Dalmeida perished on that day, together with 13 of his captains, 86 men in total, the largest defeat suffered by the Portuguese fleet ever in that entire conquest out in South Asia, on East and West Africa. And the memoirs that were sent back to the king by the surviving soldiers said that these animals fought like men. And so this precinct that covers from the river mouth, from the confluence, and this entire Two Rivers Urban Park precinct is a tapestry of connected, intense heritage. and for the Gorenai Kona, for our civic allies, for the Khoi and San, the Kai Korana, the Kochokwa. This is our world heritage, a shared world heritage of a common humanity. And it is a heritage where the capricious master of Amazon, which has the same powers as the Dutch East India Company then has, cannot and will not become a monument of our manumission from slavery. And within that simple fact, I think we are all prepared to uphold the sense of solidarity and togetherness on the matter. I'm now going to call on Danab Bradley van Sitters, who is going to give a brief expression to the importance of the river and the embankments, and then hand it back over to the MC.
And say, kindness, kindness, kindness mire, kaya, kei gangans, tua tama, hamske, 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 hayesa, hayesa, kei gangans, gangansi abotse, ne tsuhupkatsko, huida, hais haruma, itohoba, netses onga, saudare, 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 kaitaha, korasa siptes, kaitaha, korasa siptes. Happy Freedom Day. Ora sasip tes. Ora sasip tes ke. It is Freedom Day. Our freedom. The freedom of our people, of our nation, at this mountain. The great mountain that's standing there, that we call Hurikwacha. Say with me, Hurikwacha. 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 Even this place that we say, we hype. Say with me, we hype. Hype means covered in cloud. Like you see there, it's covered in a cloud. The great mountain, Hurikwacha. This is the place we say, Hamirodi, Hais. Hamirodi, where we look at the stars. The place of the stars. This is the place. The sand and the dust of our ancestors are right here. In the soil, our people, the dust of our forepeople are here. This is the place where the first blood of our people who died for our Morasasites, for our Freedom Day, happened right here. Blood is the highest currency on this earth. There is no higher currency than blood. Our people paid with the highest currency of blood. That's why when we say our family, we say Khoi, Khoi, How Khoi family, our blood people. So we are connected to these people of this land where we were born. We are coming into a freedom where we have the right to identify ourselves. We are no longer slaves. We are no longer slaves. Our people was put into captivity. Our people were murdered in great numbers. Disease was spread among them to kill them. But we have rose, the generation that they said will rise. Like the Hosi Ama flower that opens when you put water on. So we rose, these people. So this place is of great significance to us, very spiritually, because of that high currency of blood that was spilled here, of our people. And we can never forget them. We honor everyone that left their homes, left the comfort of their own place to come here in honor of the significance of Morasasi Chess, this Freedom Day that we celebrate at the foot of the great mountain. The mountain is a protector. It was set here to make sure that the waves, the sea won't rise up again and overthrow the land. The mountain is a guardian for us, is a protector of the south. Hapagas in the south. Hapagas, we are in the south. So the mountain have great memory of our people. The mountain of the sea, the mountain that rose out of the sea. So we are here to bring into memory and never forget our story. The story of not the arrival of people coming here, but the story that has been here since ancient time. I'm going to conclude now and say with me, Hutse, Hutse, Ida. We say in Creator, help us. Hutse, Ida. Hauba, Sida Kumisa. Hutse, Ida. Hauba, Sida Kumisa. Creator, help us to unify for our heritage. This here is our natural heritage. This is part of our heritage. We must be united for our heritage. So this is my word of blessing for you on this day, that we are united on a day like today for our heritage. This is our heritage. On the coat of arms of South Africa, all you South Africans, let me remind you, the slogan on the coat of arms of South Africa, this beautiful and precious land that we hold so treasure. It says, He. Say with me, He. Ehe. Harakhe. He. Ehe. Harakhe. In our diversity, we are united. Unity in our diversity. Can we celebrate that one more time by giving us just a hand? Let's celebrate those people that sacrificed their lives so that we can celebrate this Freedom Day. They did not die in vain. We will remember them, and we will make sure that generations after us will remember them. Okay, Gangans. Tuatama, Hamske, Tuatama.
Thank you very much, Program Director and the organizers of this wonderful event, for this moment that we can think about our history and what has happened here. So today, on this Freedom Day, we have come to address a great historical wrong when this part of Africa was invaded by European imperialists, it is here that they met the first Africans, whom we today know as the Khoi and the San. And this march today is to commemorate our ancestors, to commemorate our joy and our exhilaration at being Africans. And it is to say to those who for so long have tried to divorce us from the soil of this land and from our Africanness, your efforts have been in vain. You will never succeed, for today we came to reclaim that heritage in what we are doing here. This march is to commemorate one of the earliest clashes, as we have heard from our brother Tariq, that opened up a history of almost 180 years of resistance, which speaks to the resilience of our people. So whenever I hear any politician praising the resilience of South Africa's people, I want them to know they talk about that resilience that was here when the Europeans came for the first time, and that was here. When Van Riebeeck came, that was here. When Verwoerd came, that was here. When P.W. Botha came, that is still here. And it will remain here to inspire the generations to come. When the imperialists came, they came with a clear agenda. On their agenda was complete acquisition, complete dispossession of our land. On their agenda was complete genocide, the annihilation of our people. On their agenda was complete epistemicide, which is the genocide of our history, of our stories that our communities used to tell, the genocide of our dignity. But we have come here today to tell them, even in those efforts over almost 400 years, you have failed, because here we are today. On the agenda was all of these things. And that is why this march is so important. Because when you have genocide, you annihilate a people. When you have epistemicide, you try to annihilate the history of that people. But therefore this march is a march against what I call unremembering. Now, unremembering is not just simply forgetting that things have happened, or forgetting to write it down in a history book by accident. Unremembering is a deliberate process by those in power and by those with power. Unremembering, taking out of history, distorting history, reshaping history, remolding history, retelling history in order to fit the dominant narrative of those in power and those with power. We are here today to tell them that that process of unremembering has failed, because we are here to remember, to recall, and we shall honor, and we shall tell our children what happened here today. And as from today, the 27th of April, and the remembrance of our freedom, they will never be the same, because that element that has been excluded for 27 years, we have now brought back with our purpose and our willingness to do so. And this place, as you have heard from Tariq, that plaque that's over there has been vandalized by people we do not know, but we can guess. And we have come here today because we have, over the last 18 months, asked the city of Cape Town, please restore this thing. This ought to be a heritage site. not just for the city or for the province, but for the country and for the world, since this place is the birthplace of humankind. And they haven't done it, and so you have decided to do it yourself. That is a wonderful thing today, because by doing that, we are saying we are sick and tired of a city administration and of a provincial administration that acts like a traumatized post-colonial recolonializing power. We are sick of a city administration and of a provincial administration that can bow down before the statue of Cecil John Rhodes and the statue of Jan van Riebeeck, but spit in the face of Krutua and Outschmau and Klaas Stierman. We want to let them know in no uncertain terms that these people here today and all our people around are tired of that. And we will not tolerate that anymore. I look to the west and I see that mountain, a sacred place for our ancestors and for our people for thousands of years. In that mountain I see carved into the site that memorial to that great and arrogant imperialist called Cecil John Rhodes. But I'm here to tell you today, my brothers and sisters, that that memorial, like his other statues, will disappear, but the mountain will stand forever. And we will claim that mountain under whose shade our ancestors sat and under whose shade we will sit. We are here today on this sacred place. Here our ancestors prayed, and here they sang, and here they danced. Here they told their stories to their children. Here their mothers gave birth, and here we buried them who died on this land. It's a sacred place. On this place they looked toward the stars and they sought guidance for their lives into the future. On this place they fought and they resisted, and their blood was shed in sacrifice to the future of our children, their children standing here today. It is sacred ground. And what they propose is to take this sacred ground and to turn it into a development for some new liberal capitalist from across the seas with his friends and his allies in this country, and we will not let that happen. This is our land. On the agenda of the colonialists was not just genocide and epistemicide. On their agenda was their strategy of divide and rule. They knew that they could more easily fulfill that agenda if that strategy could work, if they could set us up one against the other, if they could pick some and call them chiefs and pick others and call them nothing, and use our division to overcome us. That was the strategy of Jan van Riebeeck. It became the strategy of Cecil John Rhodes. It became the strategy of H.F. Verwoerd. It became the strategy of P.W. Botha. It became the strategy of F.W. de Klerk. That strategy, we must tell them today, will fail. And that is why we must make this march and this togetherness today one of unity. And we call on all our people, let us be done with this disunited thing that we have. Let us be done with this fruitless competition amongst each other for some funds, a little bit of pennies here and there. Let us be done with a few little bit of honors and reward bestowed upon you by the new colonialists and the new imperialists of our day. Let us come together as a people. Let us stand together as a people. Our fight is not amongst ourselves. Our fight is with new colonialists in 2021. That is whom we have to resist. Now, I have been asked by the organizers of this day to announce their intention to call upon the government of South Africa to institute a new Truth and Reconciliation Commission to address the issues we are speaking of here today. Now, the first TRC did its job as it was prescribed to them in the Act of Parliament, and they couldn't go beyond that. And we are the truth, not part of the truth, not the truth as it begins in 1948 or in 1916, but in 1652. And so we will say to the government that we want reconciliation, but genuine reconciliation. Reconciliation, my brothers and sisters, is not possible without genuine remorse. It is not possible without genuine repentance. It is not possible without genuine repair. It is not possible without genuine reparation. It is not possible without genuine restoration of the land, of history, and of our dignity. It is not possible without justice, and it is not possible without equality. And that's the kind of reconciliation we will propose, and that's the kind of reconciliation we will put on the table, and that's the reconciliation we will discuss this time, not the kind that they designed in 1996. Because only when we speak of this kind of reconciliation can we speak of the healing of our people. Now, as we stand here today, on this sacred place, we must confirm our unity of purpose, our unity of mind, and our unity in the ongoing struggle. There's a wonderful woman in the United States called Nina Turner who taught us a great thing. And I would like for us, as I come to my close, to do what she taught her people in their ongoing struggle for genuine reconciliation, for genuine freedom. Because as long as we are excluded from the fullness of our freedom, this Freedom Day will remain an incomplete Freedom Day. And we must make it a complete Freedom Day. So if you don't mind, if you can, and if you can hold the distance, will you take each other's hands for a moment? Put on your masks and touch somebody's hand. Touch some. If you're standing alone, then believe that somebody from heaven will touch your hand today. And I want you to please say after me, because this is a dedication in the spirit of our coming here together today. So say after me, with these hands, we shall work. With these hands, we shall break down every wall of separation. With these hands, we shall build a new unity. With these hands, we shall hold on to the vision. With these hands, we shall fashion a new future for ourselves and for our children. With these hands, we shall reclaim the land. With these hands, we shall reclaim our dignity. With these hands, we shall reclaim our inner selves. With these hands, we shall stand together for justice. With these hands, we shall fight together for freedom. With these hands, we shall hold together all of South Africa's children. Her Khoi children, her San children, her Xhosa children, her Zulu children, her Sotho children, her Tswana children, her Venda children, her Shangaan children, her Ndebele children, her Pedi children, her Tsonga children, her Chinese children, her white children, her Kamisa children, all of us, tomorrow's children, all of us, tomorrow's children, all of us, tomorrow's children, Inkosi Sigaleli Africa.